Hello, we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, as I mentioned a little earlier, my name is Taylor Goodwin. I'm a naturopathic doctor. That means that I went through medical school, I did the doctor thing, and still do the doctor thing. But I was trained primarily in alternative medicine. So I got general training, I got pharmaceutical training as well, and then I focused and specialized in alternative medicine. So what is alternative medicine? Well, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox to go ahead and support us. And one of those tools is herbs. That's what we're going to talk about today. So, um, for the session today, I like to break it up into three sections. First, we talk about safety, because like we were talking about just a little second ago, if you get the wrong plant, that's not kosher, that's not fun. That can be dangerous. So we're going to go over that. We also want the plants to be safe. Number two, we're going to go over these three plants, which are very useful and they grow locally in the area. And then number three, I have a few classes and things that I'll let you know about at the end, and then I'm open for any questions or just shooting the breeze. So it's actually kind of nice at this location because most of the time I'm in the evening during a weekday, and it's like we end half an hour before the library closes, and so then it's like cleanup time and everything. We don't have as much time afterwards, so this might be fun. We can shoot some stuff. But today, let's start with safety. So number one, I like to tell a story for this, actually. When I was in medical school, I really enjoyed it, except for when I didn't. So there was an opportunity where there was a herbalism trip, a week-long herbalism trip that we would go from Arizona to Colorado's Rocky Mountains near the Vail Pass and the foothills there. And I said, I will pay whatever it takes to have a week of not being a medical student. And so I paid for that, went over there, and had a wonderful time with a bunch of friends and an herbalist lady who showed us all the herbs as we went around. And I didn't consider this med school because I've been a plant nerd since I was a kid. And so this was just kind of like home. But on the last day of that trip, we went up higher in the mountains and we were looking for a specific plant. It's referred to as Osha, if you want to pronounce it correctly, but Osha. And it's also called bear plant. It's a little bit rare. So we went up, and our herbalist teacher went to where the stand was supposed to be, and then unfortunately the stand was gone. And she said, "All right, well this sometimes happens, so let's go ahead and look for another stand." Actually, I'll do that. You guys, go look for arnica and wild violet and see if you can tell them apart. So we went and we were like, is this a heart-shaped leaf or an arrow-shaped leaf? I don't know. So we did that for 15 minutes, and she eventually was like, found one, and sent runners to let us know. We all shuffled back, and on the way back, one of the other students said, um, hey guys, she's going to tell us how to tell it apart from another plant. It's really cool, and it's important, so make sure you catch that. And we're all like, okay, we'll do that. All right, so we get up, we get to OSHA, and she starts telling us some wonderful things about this beautiful plant. It looks a lot like wild carrot, which, and except a little bit more lacy. I find it quite beautiful. She tells us about how OSHA was a sacred plant to the Native Americans and still is, especially those that are in the more western areas and the Navajo and such, and how it had become rather endangered at one point and it was coming back. How there were certain areas that were restricted where you never harvested it because that's the sacred lands for the Navajo in terms of that plant. And she told some other things. She mentioned, this is my favorite story, she talked about a zoo, it's called Bear Plant, where the zookeeper, there's a video, he drops some OSHA in, and Papa Bear, brum, 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 over there, grabs it, he starts lathering up, and he's just loving it for 15 seconds, and then he stops. And then he takes it back and he gives it to Mama Bear. And then Mama Bear, who's been having some bear arthritis, she enjoys it and she lathers up and she puts it all over her paws and then she chews on it and sucks on it and swallows it. And the next day, according to the subtext underneath the video, the zookeeper says, and then Mama Bear was moving better than she had for quite some time the next few days. And so the medicine had helped her. And that was just really cool. I went home and I looked up the video. Sure enough, it was there. I need to see if I can still find the link. I wasn't as organized at the beginning of my med school experience. But you might be able to Google it. I need to find it. But yeah, and so then she said some other wonderful things about OSHA and said, that's OSHA. And then we'd been taught how to make medicine out of it, right? And then the other student says, excuse me, how do you tell this apart from poison hemlock? And she was like, oh yes, that's important. You tell it apart by the smell. And it's like, oh, that's pretty similar. That's a little bit scary. We just got taught how to make medicine out of this, and that was a pretty important piece of information that got left out just for a second. Now, in this herbalist's defense, that's why I don't mention her name, she's fantastic. She made a small mistake. And I mean, she's been, camping with a bunch of, I don't have to be a med student for a week, people, 30 of us for a week. So, um, and that happens. And I'm sure it was on the handouts she gave us as well. So she did her due diligence, but it happened. So I tell this story for 3 reasons. Number one, always get more than one source. Always get more than one exposure. Always try to get your information so that you do your homework and you listen to more, a couple expert sources and things like that. Herbalists are human. Teachers are human. Doctors are human. We can forget stuff. Anyone can forget stuff. And sometimes that forgotten thing is pretty important. So I like to say information it's like catching a fish with a fisher's net. You catch a lot of fish when you go and learn from someone who knows their stuff. But there's holes in the net, and the little guys get through sometimes. So that's number one. Try to have more than one source, or a prolonged duration with a single source, or however you want to do your homework. Just do your due diligence. That's safety. Number two, the reason that I talk about this is plants can look a lot alike. Telling apart by the smell, that's about the most extreme example I know of lookalikes. There were some things if you had like a lens, or if you did, microscope, or if you just knew what elevation you were at. OSHA and poison hemlock grow at different elevations. There's some overlap too, though, so you have to be like really high before it's like, yeah, that's OSHA. And the smell difference is pretty significant, so it's not quite as impossible as it sounds, unless you're like me and your sense of smell is really, like, notably, it's a family topic of how bad my sense of smell is. So, I always have to have my wife come over and like confirm, does this smell okay to a normal human? Is this something, when I make medicine, it's like, do I need to make this smell better? Because occasionally it comes out rancid, like, not rancid, but it smells terrible. It's like, no, that doesn't taste too bad. And I give it to my wife. Can't sell that. All right. New formula. Yeah, lookalikes, they happen. And poison hemlock, spoiler, is poison. So there was a park ranger who was out in the woods taking a walk, and he decided his sandwich needed more salad. And he just took the nearest leaf, and that was his last meal. And that's unfortunate. We don't want that to happen. We need to identify things. So, also, kids, poison hemlock has hollow stems. Some kids made whistles out of the stems, and that was the last day that they had to go ahead and play. So we have to be a little careful. Most plants, they'll make you sick, they won't kill you. But they do have some around here that do grow here that will kill you. Most of the time, it's if you have a moderate-sized dose, but there are a few that are small dose too. So there's some sobering information, but if we learn to tell them apart, we can do so safely. So, third reason I tell this story, when we went up there and looked for the OSHA stand, it had disappeared, right? Plants can go extinct. And they can go extinct globally, sure, but really they can actually, this is one people don't always think about, they can go extinct locally. And they can do that a lot easier than some of us suppose. So, on the notes there in the top right, we have some rules of green thumb, all right, you can throw me out anytime, on how to harvest responsibly. If a plant is common, meaning it's a weed, I mean, if it's on your property and it's a weed, do whatever you want. Weed, to me, just means plant that we don't know what its use is yet. But if it's a weedy, useful plant, sure, you can do whatever you want on your property unless it's endangered. If it's endangered, please try to share your space. But if it's common, harvest up to half, roots included, everything, there you go, of a stand of plants. If it is uncommon, it's best to go and look on the state agriculture sites, forestry sites, and see how rare and endangered is it in this area. But the rule of thumb, when it's kind of like just ish, is don't touch the roots of any of them, but you can take 1/3 of the leaves and the parts up top. That's kind of like a deer coming by and browsing. And most plants actually really like that. They send up new hormones, gibberellins and auxins, and then it gets bushier and you have even more next time. So if it is endangered, take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints. So those will keep our plants around year after year. Last thing, which is not part of the story, but it's another safety thing. Plants, did you know that 70 to 90%, roughly, of medications were originally from plant molecules? So pharmaceuticals are just plant medicine, concentrated, synthesized, purified, concentrated, and then changed a little bit. And, it's gotten pretty far away from it, but originally the molecule was in plants. It makes sense then that medications and plants might interact. Also, they're going into the same body. And if the body is trying to do this and then it does it twice, that might not be a great thing. Make my heart beat stronger. Make my heart beat even stronger. Oh, too much. Don't do that. So when you are taking medications, if you want to use an herb, talk to a doctor before you do so is the safest avenue. And that's what I recommend. So that way you just don't have any mishaps. Even if your doctor is not a natural doctor, an herbalist, that sort of thing, whatever specialty you want to think of, have access to databases where they can plug it in and say, all right, Perilla and 5-hydroxytryptophan, whatever, or testosterone via supplementation, or methotrexate, and then it shows any interactions that are known. And they tend to be pretty good about those, because if the interaction is serious, then someone just did it at some point, and it gets reported because they go to the hospital, or they do a lot of testing as well, although they don't always test, all right, now take this herb and the medication, because that's irresponsible. But it tends to get into the database. So those are my 3.5 little things on safety. Any questions? Okay. Fantastic. Then we can get into the fun stuff. So, and since it's a library, I might just go ahead and give other people their privacy. Or silence, anyway. Because trying to shut me up is good luck. We have 3 plants. Would anyone like to take a guess? This guy, all of his leaves have become sad. So we also have a press. Anyone want to? I'm going to go ahead and show over here. Anyone want to take a guess? You can hide where it says what it is. It's at least familiar, right? Right. This is Plantago. Common name, plantain, not the banana.
I started to say it was plantain, but I couldn't tell for sure because of that.
Yeah.
Usually when I've harvested plantain, it was before it had the stalk come out of it.
Fair enough. Yeah, the stalks are not always there, but we brought that for a seed to show a little bit about that. But Plantago, there are 2 species in particular that grow around here. One of them is Plantago major, or majora, and then another one, and Plantago lanceolata. Lanceolata has the long skinny leaf, and major has the fat leaf. I like the fat leaf personally. They're both used the same way. There are some chemical differences in them, but I mean they both tend to have similar uses. If you mix both of them together, then you get the best of both worlds, but they're pretty similar. So, Plantago. That's kind of a weird name. Where did it come from? Why did we name it that? How many of you have ever had the misfortune to know what plantar fasciitis is? Anyone? No?
Oh, yeah, on your feet.
Yeah. The people who know it, and then they always wish they didn't. So, you have some connective tissue that goes across the bottom of your foot. It helps keep the structure happy. If you stretch it too much, your arch gets too flat. That gets inflamed. It has micro tears. Hopefully it doesn't have full tears. That's not fun. And it hurts. So plantar means bottom of the foot. That's why we call it plantar fasciitis. Fascia being the connective tissue. Well, this guy, Plantago, that sounds like that. Was it named because of the foot? I mean, it was named because of the foot, not because of the fascia. not because of the disease, but back when the colonials first came over and were meeting the Native Americans and were setting up here, they actually brought this guy. One plant can make 20,000 seeds.
Oh, wow.
And so he's really, really good at spreading. And all of his seeds are kind of like static electricity sort of a thing, maybe little teeny little bits of attachment. But once they get on stuff, they're easy to attach, easy to fall off, and there's a ton of them. And so the colonials came over, and they just were shedding seeds. And so everywhere they went, the Native Americans saw behind them plantain, because it was not native here. And they just saw everywhere the white man went, plantain followed him like a loyal pet. And so the Native Americans called it white man's footprint. You could tell wherever the colonials had been, because it's like, they've been here because of this plant. And so footprint, bottom of the foot, Plantago. Plantar, bottom of the foot. So that's where it gets its name. Major is because the leaf is bigger. Lanceolata is because it's a lance-like leaf. So there's where the name comes from. It helps us remember the plant, in my opinion, when we know these things about it. It's also just cool. One more story about plantain, and then we'll get into its medical uses. Did you know this little-known playwright back in the day named William Shakespeare? He, in Act 2, Scene 3 of Romeo and Juliet, Romeo is like, I can't be with Juliet, and this is so terrible, and, pining for love. And his friend, ever so helpful, Benicio, says, in today's terms, yo, Romeo, you're really kind of down about this girl. But girls are kind of like toothaches, right? And so, if I have a toothache, and I want to forget about it, I get another toothache. Ah, ha, ha, ha. And Romeo's like, plantain's really good for toothaches. Benicio, shut up. And so, there we have it. Romeo was an herbalist, because he's correct. One of the uses of plantain is astringent, which is really good for toothaches. But we'll talk about, astringent. What does astringent mean? So these are the particular words. So backing up, I get too excited. All right. Actions are the extreme shortening of what a plant does, herbally speaking. So if you are looking to learn herbalism, focusing on actions is one of the key points that I always tell students. Go ahead and try to have those as your organization method. There are more things behind the action on exactly how it does it that are important to know, but the starting point is to know actions. And I forgot to hand these out earlier. I would like them back at the end, but if you are inclined to take notes, here is the facilitation. You don't need to, but if you're like me, then you have a writing implement on you 90% of the time. The 10% of the time you don't is when you need it. So, the actions, astringent, meaning tightening. Why is that helpful? Well, if you have a wound and it's oozing and everything, you want the wound to close, right? So tightening helps. If you have loose ligaments, people with Ehlers-Danlos or Marfan syndrome, or inflamed connective tissue diseases like fibromyalgia or reactive arthritis where your joints hurt, but it's actually the connective tissue around it that's really affected, you want, once those are inflamed, they get a little bit longer and swollen. Sometimes you can't see the swelling, sometimes you can, and that makes them a little bit longer and looser, and everything just feels off, or might even be dislocating really easy if you have Marfans and that kind of thing, where it's a genetic thing and it's quite out there. Astringent actually helps wring out some of that swelling and get you reset and your connective tissue happier. I personally have some plantain most mornings to help connective tissue, because I once almost had an inguinal hernia, where you have stuff come through connective tissue because it got too weak, or you worked too hard with lots of pressure inside, where you're trying to pick something up too much, and then it's no fun. So I take plantain, and it helps re-secure that area where I felt that we got a little bit weak, and then after having that, it's helped quite a bit. So astringent. The one other thing, I kind of mentioned how it'll take swelling a little bit down. and it will take swelling down. Now, if there's an infection or inflamed material, that's not super helpful to have right there. We don't really want all of the garbage of broken cells and broken bacteria. We have cells in our body called macrophages that go through and they clean all this stuff up because it's not what we want there. And it gets boggy there and it makes it hard to heal. So if I have an infection and I put some astringent material in one way or another in that area, I like to think of all the junk there as like a sponge full of dirty water. And what an astringent does is it takes that sponge and it wrings it out. And then you can put clean water in a lot easier. So garbage out and good stuff in. It's the opposite of the tech thing where it's garbage in, garbage out. This one's like garbage out, good stuff in. Tech nerd too. So astringents are really good for helping you get good stuff back into an area and clearing out bad. So plantain, which part of it is astringent? The leaf. And well, that's good enough. So here is the leaf. That's major. He shrunk a little because I didn't get him pressed fast enough. He's usually bigger and fatter than that. And then this is lanceolate. So, and I'm going to see if I can find in my bag. I had a larger, fresher pressed leaf that shows some parts on that make it easier. Yeah, come here. All right, you're getting a little curly, but you'll still work. This guy likes to be fresh, used fresh. So at the tip of the leaf, let's go into identifying the leaf. At the tip of the leaf, let's see if I can. At the tip of the leaf, you'll see some little threads, and then you'll see some veins along the back of the leaf that are parallel. So some threads at the leaf stalk, and then you'll see parallel veins coming up the leaf. Okay? This leaf stalk is in a U shape, like celery, and the threads, when you tear celery rather than cutting it, are kind of like celery too. So the leaf stalk is basically, you can just look for the celery leaf stalk. Okay? The celery leaf stalk. And then parallel veins that you can feel on the back of the leaf. Now, the leaf is very good also as a pot herb. That's not exactly an action, but basically all throughout European history for hundreds and hundreds of years, plantain, it was known that it was useful for medicine, but they just threw it in their pots to eat. It was just their spinach, no oxalates. Woohoo! So, I have this every morning as well, every morning. Just, instead of buying my dark greens, there are plenty around here that I can just pull. So, pot herb, it's good and nutritious. It also has one other action that's really cool. Vulnerary, or if you want to use English instead of Latin, wound healing. So this guy is quite good in a number of ways. Number one, he is moderately, he's not like the one that I would depend on, but he's also antimicrobial as another action. So that helps, clean the wound out. But for the wound healing portion, he makes so that the skin wants to replicate safely, not replicate unsafely. For some people are like, tumors! No, not that kind of replication. And reseal. And that's really nice. And so he just speeds that along. He also helps keep it at a good liquid level, which is important if you want healing to occur. He's astringent, so he wrings out a lot of stuff, but he doesn't get rid of everything. He himself actually has some mucilage, is what we call it, some slimy stuff, that keeps it from getting dry. Dry wounds, all of our repair cells swim. They don't crawl. So we need it a little bit moist, almost all the time. And he keeps it there. Something else about his wound healing is really cool. In this part, there are lots of fun stories. I don't know that I'll have time to tell all of them because it's just too good. But I will tell this one. I had a friend, and she slept in an area that it was kind of like a mudroom, call it that. She was She was staying at someone else's place in between places, and it's like, I'm not renting, $400 thing for 4 days, So stayed in the mudroom for a little while, and one of those nights she got a spider bite right on the back of her neck, and she went in to her primary care doctor, and they're like, all right, it's not a brown recluse, and it's not a black widow bite, so it's not fun, but you're not going to die, So sent her home. 3 or 4 days later, I talked with her, and she's like, this happened 3 or 4 days ago, and I got this bite, and I looked at it, and it was an angry bite. I could see like the dark, very dark red with a little bit of yellow maybe, but not infectious yellow, just very unhappy, and then a big old red, softer red outline around that, and it just was not a happy camper. And she said, I have a headache 24/7, and it hurts like heck, and it's just killing. And it's like, that's not fun. Well, let's try something. I went out and I got some plantain. I think I actually got it in a salve where it also had calendula and a couple of other things in there. But the plantain is the one that we're focusing on because the plantain has some fun enzymes. We put that on there, and I didn't expect as much of a result as we got. Half an hour later, no headache, no pain, and it was gone from then on. And we don't always see that extreme and quick of a response, but sometimes we do. And I'm not terribly surprised. It must have been three certain enzymes that are in many spiders' venoms. It's not everything in spider venom. You can't just say, brown recluse, I'm going to put plantain on it and we're fine. They have other things in there too. And same with snake bites. They have a lot of times these things that I'm going to talk about, but they also have other ones. So for safety's sake, if you get bit by a copperhead, don't just put plantain on there and be like, I'm good. You can do that once. So,
Don't get sick.
So plantain, in our skin, we have collagen. Yes, we've heard of collagen. Good. It makes it have that fullness, that luxurious texture. We also have elastin, which makes us have this bounce back, makes it tight in a good way. And then we also have this long word, hyaluronic acid. Just trust me that that's the stuff that's in between all the cells and makes them all happy. Okay, so we got those things in there. And venoms break those down. They have, if you put the word ACE, A-S-E, at the end of a science word, it means I cut you up. So we have collagen ACE, and that's what the spider has. And so he sends Pac-Man in there to cut up collagen, because then it lets all the lovely stuff out, and the spider's trying to kill whatever was threatening it. So, it has collagen ACE, it has elastase, and then it has hyaluronic acidase, or hyaluronidase, excuse me, you don't throw the acid in there. And so you get all your important stuff being chewed up by the venom. Plantain has anti-hyaluronidase, anti-collagenase, anti-elastase, and it turns off all those enzymes. And so the spider, all those things stop damaging the skin. And so you can turn off part of a spider bite, part of a snake bite, and that's really nice. Wasp stings, also very good. Bug bites, also very good. Earlier you get it on there, the better, but apparently in her, those enzymes are still going strong, which is like, that's not fun. Explains why it looked so not great, still being chewed apart, So with the wound healing, on top of the turn off the bad guy, this guy is a star. How would I use him? There are some other things we'll talk about in a moment, but how would I use him? The leaf is the part that we're mostly talking about here. There are a few different ways. You can just eat the leaf. It spreads internally, and that's kind of a gentle everywhere help. And you'd want to have, 6 leaves to maybe see a little bit of effect, and then more than that if you can, if you want to. But that's like the minimum. And there's also putting it on top. But if you just put the leaf on top, all the leaf cells are still like holding on to their medicine. They're not just like, oh, there's a human, I'm going to leak it out to him. It's like, maybe if you have a very close connection with the plant and you can say, please, plant, please give me your medicine. Maybe that'll work for you. For me, I'm a little bit more rough. I take it and I chalk it up and I get either a little bit of water, a little bit of oil, and then with my little plant paste, I go ahead and will put it on top, or I will take the leaf, and plantain leaf is very delicate. Most leaves you can put in hot water. This one, you can have some deactivation of some of the good, according to Michael Moore, and I trust him. Michael Moore is one of the foremost sources you can have. He was a scientist, a botanist, an herbalist, and a clinician, and he really knew his stuff, and he listed like how many parts per million is this molecule in this plant. So he's really, really reliable, and he said if you put it in hot water, you are basically drinking potassium tea, and that's all you're getting. It's not quite that extreme, but if you make a lukewarm tea out of it, and then you dip a cloth in there and put that over the top, you can have a compress, a plantain compress, that'll also get it in there. Notice all of these methods, there's broken plant and moisture, so that the stuff can travel too. Now, there's one other method, and it's actually my favorite. I call it the Boy Scout method. You take the leaf, you don't bother washing it, you throw it in your mouth, you chew it up, you spit it onto your arm, and you're done. So, that's actually completely valid, and it's good for cuts, abrasions, burns, bug bites, any kind of skin issue. It really is very nice and broad. So, with this, you want the juice to go out. I know this is the fun topic, right? You want all the juice to go out. You don't swallow the juice and then spit out the plant material. You want the juice to go out with it. And bonus, saliva actually is medicinal. It's pretty nuts. We have a lot of enzymes, and we also have nitrate and nitrite converting enzymes which make bacteria unhappy to protect our mouth, and those work down here. If we get any nitrogen, which bacteria bring along, then we have some stuff in our mouth that's like, aha, nitrogen's here. That means bacteria's here. And we put this booby trap that as soon as it sees nitrogen, boom, it turns into bacteria poison. And so that goes on the wound as well. So saliva also is a really good extractor. Kava, which is another plant, they use it on the islands in particular. If you try to extract it in water, okay. If you try to extract it in oil, okay. If you try to extract it in alcohol, okay. Only saliva actually gives you all of the things that you associate with kava as strongly as it does, as quickly as it does. You can get it other ways. It's not as strong, it's not as quick, that kind of a thing. So it's not like, oh, saliva's magic. I mean, it kind of is, but it's a marvelous extractor. So there's actually some good reasons to go ahead and add that there. So there's some fun on how to go ahead and use it, and it has one more action. Those are the main actions: astringent, wound healing, and then very light antimicrobial. I usually don't even mention it because I wouldn't rely on him. Put it that way, okay? The seed head has one other one. Now, it has that dangerous potential known as laxative. All right. So the seeds, I'm going to come ahead, bring them around. You'll notice there are no leaves growing off of these stems. Okay, these are just seed stems. We're also going to talk about how to identify the rest of the plant. Kind of going here and there, hither and yon. Seed heads. The seeds, perhaps you've even seen them on store shelves. Metamucil. That's what these are. So the seeds are like, it's a subspecies difference. They're virtually identical to Metamucil, to psyllium husk in particular. And so identical, so close to identical that a lot of people just say that they are identical, and actually the same plant, but they're technically like a half-sister species, or full sister, I guess would be closer, whatever. And so you can just take that, and the seed, put it in some cold water typically. You can do hot as well. And you go ahead and drink that down. If you let it sit, it will get that mucilaginous, that gooey kind of texture, which if you're trying to soothe the upper throat and esophagus and all that kind of stuff, you probably want to wait until it gets nice and that's the one texture I can't do. I can do bitter, I can eat fiber straight, and everyone's like, what are you doing? But it'll really, really help. It's also laxative, so it'll pull some stuff out if you're plugged up. It also helps with diarrhea. It helps both ways because it has fiber that helps bind stuff together so that it's not so loose. But if it's too tight, then it also brings water in, and so it loosens it up. So there's the fun topic for today. I know that's what you came for. And how do we identify this guy? So I'm going to show this again, and I'm just going to give you some of his layout. Notice at the bottom, so there's no leaves along the seed stalk. All the leaves come out from the base. Okay? In addition to all the little leaf characteristics we talked about, the formation of this guy is a basal rosette. Basal meaning baseline or ground level. Rosette meaning like a rose has flowers all the way around and then more petals on another layer and then more petals on another layer, and they have these like multi-layered. That's where rosette came from, is like it's rose-like. And so basically it's Mother Earth's corsage. So you have a little, it just all comes out of a central point in the ground. So plantain, knowing, by the way, on the side here, knowing these botanical terms like basal rosette or simple leaf or alternate leafing pattern, all of these make us able to remember what we're looking for. This is a fun little aside. There were two ladies who were professional tasters. Like they tasted foods, they tasted stuff. And they would go around, they were really funny to watch because they just back and forth. And they had all this vernacular and lingo and vocabulary, all these words that are like, I have no idea what they're talking about. But they were extremely specific, definite describers of flavors and textures and all the things in between, just all these like fine, oh, it's got an undertone of this. An undertone actually meant something specific. It wasn't just like a vague, and then it has a side tone. I'm making stuff up now. Whatever they said. And because they were able to describe it, that's how they could remember, oh yeah, that pistachio ice cream I had 2.5 years ago, it was exactly like this. And they could actually just give an accurate representation of what something tasted like because they had words to hold ideas in. And so when science has some fun with a bunch of weird words and it's like, why don't you just say wound healer? Well, vulnerary has a few other little indications beneath it that make it mean what it means. And we won't go into great definition right now. A lot of them, though, are just a little bit, pretentious. So you don't need every scientific word. But basal rosette will help you identify things. Because then you can say, is it a basal rosette, yes or no? And that might tell you the difference between two plants versus, well, you wouldn't be looking for it otherwise. So there are a lot of fun words. Anytime you come up with a word that you haven't heard before, if you were wanting to learn herbal medicine, you mentioned, usually I don't do this spiel, I'm doing it because you mentioned specifically that's what you're looking for. That's important for being able to identify and tell parts of plant, get the vocabulary of a botanist. So, and we just got one. So that is Plantago. Any questions about him? No? Okay. Collar puff. Did amazing then. All right. And next we have the exotic and unknown oak. All right. Oak is kind of everywhere. It is actually really fun. There was in the book A Modern Herbal, written in 1920. It's no longer title accurate, modern, but it was among one of the last years that herbal medicine and mainstream medicine were together. They're actually starting to come more back together. Functional medicine's really picking up, and we have more and more research. Actually, herbs are a hot research topic, not just for herbalists right now, just in general. I expect in 20 years, we're going to see a lot more in the mainstream office, which is great. I'm very happy about that. I just want it to work, and having the tools available. But in 1920s, this was where they had both drugs and herbs in the same one, and so they wrote about them very technically, and it was a pharmacopoeia, materia medica. So it's what the doctors would reference and look at, one of the things. And when you came to any of the plant entries, it would how to identify the plants. And it would go into like really detailed but brief identifiers. you come to oak, and I think it's hilarious. He says, oak. It looks like oak. We all know what the leaf looks like. Here are some details on the bark, I guess. And then it goes into all the medicine. It's like, all right, well, so my job's done. This is oak. All right, here we go. Next. Oak. So so we all kind of know what oak looks like. But if you want to really be sure, I'm going to do the identification first this time, I guess. Look for acorns. There's your little, litmus test. Is this a true oak? Acorns. Okay. So all oaks are used the same, which is nice. There are lots of species, and if you had to tell red oak from white oak, from yellow oak, from black oak, from purple oak, and not all of those are a real thing, by the way, then you'd be studying a lot of plants and differentiation. For me, it's oak. Eventually, I do want to become that level of botanical nerdiness, but for now, it's oak. The medicinal uses are two in particular. Number one, binding astringent. Most places just list astringent, and so it's like you would see the same category, right? And an astringent is an astringent. Well, there's always subtext. And this one, I'm going to go ahead and give you the subtext right up in the name, just so it's easier to remember. Binding astringent. Other action, antimicrobial. Antimicrobial, that's not the same as antibacterial or antiviral or antifungal or antiparasite. Antimicrobial either means one of those, and we're not going to bother to tell you which one, or maybe two of them, or all of them. This guy's case is all of them. He's pretty good. Now, when I say all of them, does that mean he kills all bacteria? No. He kills a subset of bacteria, but he does kill some of them. Some of them he kills really well, others they don't mind. Same with virus, same with parasite, and whatever one I haven't said yet. Fungi. So subset. A lot of time, here's another aside, since you guys are particularly interested in herbal medicine. If you have, I want to make sure I have time for this. I don't. I'm still going to say it. All right, so if you see something that says antibiotic, antimicrobial, a really common mistake is to say, oh, it's antibacterial, it will kill whatever my bacteria is, so you put a lot of that in, and that's all you do. What if that bacteria doesn't mind that thing? So just know that it doesn't kill everything, and then we can talk more details another time. But that's the highlight. So oak has 3 parts that are useful, and it's really fun because this is a 3-stage plant, I like to call them, kind of like elder is, where similar uses are across different parts, but they're in different strengths. So the weakest part is the easiest to access, the leaf. Go ahead and feel the leaf. Just rub it between your fingers. That is thick. It is 4 times thicker than a normal leaf, roughly. It's very tough. So you're not going to use a tea to get the leaf goodies out. You're going to use a decoction. You got to boil this guy for 10 minutes straight, and that'll pull him out. Turns brown, you know that you've gotten the tannic acid, which is something that you don't want every day, but for medical use, it's the active part, well, one of the active parts. Plants always have a mix. That's another one of the mistakes that gets made. This is the one molecule that does everything. No. Yeah. I can tell you a story about scurvy, but I've told you too many stories already. So, and vitamin C. But you want to do a decoction, you get the tannic acid out there. Now, tannic acid, I'm going to tell you about binding astringents, then we're going to probably punch through. On the injury, if you go ahead and put tannic acid, you put oak decoction in one of whatever form of application you're doing, you put that on there. Tannic acid is a binder, and he steals positively charged things like minerals and like some of the things that bacteria like to eat in us. And we're the one-stop shop supermarket. It's why bacteria want us, we're just that good. So you put the tannic acid on there, and it's like taking the table sheet and yanking the buffet away from it. And now they've got to have scraps on the floor. And so they're not as happy. It's also antimicrobial, and so they're being attacked the whole time that they're trying to scrounge scraps off the floor. Basically, we're stealing some of their food source by binding it to the tannins. And then the tannins are also poison to the bacteria or whatever else we're talking about. So
It's very nice for helping clean out the top of a wound. You can also drink this as a tea. Our liver does not like it. But imagine a bucket, all right? If you have the bucket not full, the liver's like, I can handle this much. Outright poisons, the liver doesn't like any amount. You can find some in things like comfrey that everybody loves. I don't use that internally unless I do special extractions, because it does actually damage the liver. You won't notice until you do. And once you do, it's too late. You're not going to die at that point, hopefully, but your liver will be damaged. But tannic acid is different from that. This one is the bucket. Your liver can, as long as you don't overflow on it, your liver is like, oh, this is obnoxious, but all right, I took care of it. Now we're okay. So you just don't want to have too much, right? So you can take it internally. I use other things when I need an astringent and antimicrobial internally. I would not go this way just because you have other tools. If this was my only tool and I needed it, would I use it? Yes. It's not like it's, oh, my liver's dead now. But it fills the bucket pretty quickly. So you don't want to have a whole lot of it. It helps tighten tissue. It'll help with ulcers. It'll help with infections. It'll help with toning of tissues. And what are the other parts that we can get these wonderful activities from at an even stronger level? The next one is the inner bark. I believe cambium, if I'm remembering my botanicals correctly. Outer bark is deadish. It's dead tree, and it's a shield. You go through that, you get something that still feels just a little moist. That's the inner bark. Now, always cut vertical if you're taking bark. If you cut horizontal, you have just killed that tree's blood vessel system, and the tree will die. Just go vertical, because then you're taking one blood vessel out rather than cutting through every single blood vessel and taking a small portion. A straw that you take the middle portion out of does not work. That's great for kitty cups. You can put two, one over here, one over here. Trees, they can't move their straws around. So cut vertical. You do the same thing in decoction, and that would be stronger. The most powerful one. What do you guys think it is? Most powerful part?
Acorn.
Trick question. Yeah, that's exactly the answer you should give, and I'm a jerk because it's not the acorn. So it is the oak gall. The acorn is about as powerful. It's between the leaf and the bark, and usually we leach out the tannins from that and use it to grind it down into food. The acorn meat in the middle. To leach out the tannins, you do an overnight soak once or twice or 3 times, and then you change the water. And it takes all the tannins out, and so then you have acorn meat that's not super bitter. Tannins are very bitter, and doesn't have liver unhappiness at an appreciable level. There's still a little in there, but thank you for humoring me. But the oak gall, we have these circles that grow on oak trees, and it's like, is that a second fruit? Is that like an oak apple? What is that thing? Well, it turns out it's a wasp nest. Kind of, but not really. So wasps are very picky about the oaks they select, but when they find one they like, they lay their eggs inside. And then the oak tree is like, oh, crap. They've penetrated my defenses. I might get an infection. Pump everything there. They send tons of medicine and growth to make a ping pong ball of protection. And the wasp eggs are inside there. And eventually they'll hatch and come out. But before they do that, that's when we come along. While they're still soft for an oak tree, you know what I mean? And still moist, I guess I should say. They're not completely dried out, is what I'm going for. It's not like squeeze like a sponge. You take those, and the wasps are still like, they're not wasps at this point. So you don't need to worry about that. And you grind it up. And because the oak sent so much stuff to protect there, that means we get so much stuff in our medicine. Okay? The oak actually did put a concentrated medicine pocket there. And it really is. So you just make a decoction, you grind that up, and you make a decoction the same way as anything else. And there's wasp in it. Yes, that's true. And there you go. Welcome to nature. So, fun little thing. Instead of using that decoction for medicine, you can also do a couple of extra steps. You can look those up and make ink. And then you can use it Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence, because that is what it was written with, oak ink, oak gall ink. So we know that the ink lasts a good long time. So that is oak. Any questions on Quercus gamboli, or Quercus subspecies, because gamboli is only one of them. Wonderful. All right. Last, we have the one that I wanted the most time for, and we have the least time for. Mint. Beautiful Perilla mint. Shaky, shaky, shaky. All right.
Everywhere, man.
Yep. Now, agricultural people, I should say dairy farmers, anyone who has ruminants on their land, and they want the ruminants to live, they don't like this guy. He kills ruminants really well. He's very good at his job, if we want that job.
So the only poisonous to ruminants when the leaves are starting to wilt.
Really? Oh, I could see that in some cases. Ruminants have an enzyme that converts. That's interesting. I'll have to look into that. I haven't heard that particular thing. Ruminants have an enzyme that convert one of the molecules in this guy into a molecule that targets the lungs. And then they get fluid on the lungs, and they have something called ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. And they have foaming mouth, and if they're alive in 3 days, they're alive, and they're fine. If they're dead in 3 days, then they're dead. And that's really where it goes. So, that doesn't happen in humans. We don't have that enzyme that makes it change. Okay? So, Perilla, the name is kind of fun. Linnaeus gave this name. He was the original botanist who was like, all right, we got 700 different things called snakeweed. Let's go ahead and give them another name that's not just going to be a common name, replicated over and over and over. Like a name just for this plant. That's him. That's Linnaeus. That's what he did. And he gave this Perilla frutescens. And that should be on your sheet already. And why did he name it Perilla? Well, para, if I remember my Latin correctly, means little bag. And there's a portion in the sexual structure, the flower structure of the plant, where it looks kind of sort of like a little bag before it opens. Maybe he named it for that. There was another idea, though, that some botanists had, because he didn't write it down. He didn't write down why he named it that, so we're kind of like speculating. Some botanists think he might have known about the first use of the word perilla that we're aware of, and that he probably would have been aware of because of the classical education, where there was a Roman poetess at the time of Julius Caesar, and she wrote poems that were a little bit racy. And she knew Julius Caesar's friends quite well. And so she got some higher echelon connections, and one of them decided to have the great idea to write her a letter. And because the letter was a little bit racy as well, he signed it not to, her name wasn't Perilla, her name was Caesarea Marilla. And this guy was like, don't worry, I'll protect your reputation. Perilla, no one will know. And then he sent it, and it's like, oh, geez, you probably got an earful the next day. And those letters have survived to this day, so she's now famous for all the wrong reasons. But you know what they say? There's no such thing as bad publicity. So she was a fairly popular, and she wrote racy things already, but poetess. And why would that be attached to mint? Well, some botanists think Linnaeus was like, well, this mint is pretty. It's kind of spicy, and it gets around. So that would be how we go ahead and tie it to Perilla of ancient Rome. It does get around in the sense that mints will creep outwards and take over little sections as much as it can. Once they have it, they're good at keeping it. It does taste a little bit spicy, and it is a pretty plant. So there we are. What are its uses? Okay, now this actually has a lot of really good uses. Too many for me to talk about now. Too many for me to talk about probably even in an hour. This thing is a powerhouse. But we're going to talk about the top three we're going to talk about three. It's really hard to say top. It does a lot of cool things. We're going to talk about the three that I find I use it for the most. Put it that way. I call it the meditation plant because, number one, it helps your breathing. Number two, it helps center your emotions. And number three, it helps clear your mind and improve your memory and cognition. So Perilla is really useful. We're going to go through all of these actions are for the leaf and the flower. And let's do some identification because it doesn't help you if you can't identify it. And just in case our time going out means that we have to close up instead of just going a little bit over, note the stem. Let's see if I can give you that. You should see a little line running vertically up the stem that's like a trough in the middle of, I don't know if you can see it, but good luck. All right, go ahead and note the stem. See that line running up, trough? It's running up right there. That is something that Perilla does. Now, please take the stem roughly right here and then roll it between your fingers. Roll the plant. Square. Mother Nature does not do angles very often. Well, she does, but she hides them really well. This one is a blatant square. Square stem. And then the leafing pattern at the node. A node means where you have all the stuff that might grow is going to grow at a node. We have 2 leaf stalks coming off, not 1. So imagine my forearms are a stem. Okay, imagine my forearms are a stem. My thumbs are going to be leaves. Oh, aren't they cute? So this is an opposite branching pattern. This leaf is opposite from this leaf. They're right across from each other, a mirror. All right. This is alternate. One, then the other. Alternate leafing pattern. This is one of the main tools for identifying plants. This one gets used all the frickin' time. So, mints, the entire family of mints, have square stems and opposite leaves. All mints. That's the mint family. So you now can identify hundreds of plants to their family. Congratulations. Perilla in particular has, at the node, it'll have 2 leaves come off or 2, secondary stems, either way. It'll also have 2 flower spikes. This helps you identify Perilla from its poisonous look-alike basil. Okay, it's not poisonous. Basil will not have 2. It will have something, I believe it's 12 little short guys all around. It looks like a wreath if you look at it from the top. This guy has 2 antennae, if you want to call it that. That makes it sound less pretty. Has 2 whatever you want to call them. So right here you can see 2 flowers coming off at the node. See, there's the node, and you have 2 flowers. I guess that one has one of the flowers broken off, but you get the idea. Look at the one further up. All right. Also, Perilla has a smell that you can usually just notice. Go ahead and just...
I smell it every day.
All right, great.
Brush hogging it down.
Yeah.
I've fight it out of my yard for the last 2 years.
Well, now you'll just eat it out. A couple other things for identification, but really, if you can do those, I'll tell you the last one, the leaf. So around here, you can have one that's all red, or you can have one that's all green, or you can have, and this is the one that really tells you that it's Perilla, green on top, and then light haze of red on the bottom. Let's see, do I have that example? Red, purple, sure. Purple, red, it just has just a little bit, looks like, do any of you guys want to favor me with your... Aha! There's... Oh, that's really weak. There's just a little bit of darkening. There's just a little bit of darkening. It still looks green, but it's darker green because the red is trying to come through. Not every leaf, not every plant, but if you see especially true red or purple on the bottom, then it's like, all right, has everything else has that? Perilla. No other mint has that on the bottom. So are all mints edible? No. So just because it's mint family doesn't mean you're good. You need to identify the rest of the way. The fact that it smells minty, as well as other things, is a really good safety sign, though, because I and other botanists that I have talked to or have read their books and everything, they're like, I have never come across a mint that has a minty smell that was also not edible. Few botanists are willing to say that is a safe rule, just to be like, smells like mint, it's a mint family, I'll eat it without identifying it. But almost to that point. Like aggregate berries are to that point. All aggregate berries are edible. But we're getting off the topic. So we're going to come back over here. At least in Northern America, the aggregate berry thing. Perilla's uses. So we're going to use the leaves and the flowers for this. At a low dose, which is roughly either a tablespoon or dried, a teaspoon, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, whatever, in tea. We're going to talk about tea. You can use it a lot of other ways. It's also just a great potter. Throw it in soup. You know, it's like the plantain. You add it to your spinach. You add it to your salad. Really good edible. But for the opening of the airways, this is the one that happens first, in my opinion. Lowest dose. You know, 1 leaf, maybe 2. 1 little flower stalk, definitely. And you notice your airways. You don't feel the airways open, but all of a sudden you can take deeper breaths, and you just get more air down there. And it's like, wow. It's like, have you ever done a sprint or a run, and then at the end of the run, you know, you're panting or whatever, if it was that much of a thing, but your lungs tend to be a little more open for the next several hours. It's like that. This is a bronchodilator, is the technical term. It opens the airways, bronchodilator. Next, now it does not get rid of your cough. It does not get rid of your phlegm. It does not dry up the phlegm. It does a little bit, but not enough that I would use it as the main action. So it just opens the airways. Your rattling wheeze and all that kind of stuff is still going to be there. It could help prevent some of the wheezing because it does have some anti-allergic action as well. But that's secondary. So write it down if you like. It does count, but it's not going to be like, there's my, what do they call it? Zyrtec in a plant. It's not quite. But it does open, which helps. So that's the breathing of the meditation plant. The emotion, it's nervine, which means 2 things. Nervine, you'll get slightly different definitions as you go around, but my definition of nervine generally is a pretty good one to go by for connecting to others as well. But it nourishes the nerves, literally and physically. Your nerves will be healthier. And nervine also usually means emotionally, oh, my nerves are shot, that kind of thing, helps calm that back down. And in Perilla's case, it is so good at that emotional side that we give it another term that's specific, anxiolytic. Lytic means cut or stop. Anxio, anxiety. It's great for stopping anxiety, including impending panic attacks. It's kind of hard to abort those, and so it's nice to have a tool to help you. That's something I have used this for. You also need to be doing your own, the clearing of the mind, and there's a bunch of tools I could talk about, but basically the plant isn't going to do the whole work of aborting a panic attack for you. That's but it'll help strongly enough that it counts for something. And sometimes it might abort it entirely for you. Depends on exactly who you are, what's causing it. Yes, and you would take 2 tablespoons fresh or teaspoons dry, especially with the flowers. But the leaves count. And you would let it steep for probably, usually I say 10 minutes, but for this, 15, 20. Or you can just take the flower and the leaves, chew and suck. And do that for a while, and then swallow, put some new ones in. That's faster if it's like panic attack, you don't have 20 minutes. And so that's when you just put the plant material in your mouth and it's, oh, it's food, you know. It's going to go in your mouth one way or the other. And the reason we chew and suck and keep it there is because our mucous membranes can absorb things into the bloodstream directly. Whereas if you just swallow it, it's going to take that half hour, 45 minutes, get down here, get processed, get pulled in, and then maybe eventually get up and do its thing an hour later, you know, like 45 minutes later. And so if you want it fast, you suck on it. And it goes through, I won't show you the bottom of my tongue, but if you ever look in the mirror, at the bottom of your tongue, there's two giant veins just below the surface. If you hold it under your tongue, it'll go into those guys. So, this is also, yeah, it's healthy for the nerves. We'll just leave it there. Now, it's also mildly, for some cases, antidepressant. If depression is tied to anxiety, which often it is, but not always. Some people are depressed and not at all anxious. For those people, would I use this plant? Not as my first choice, not as my second choice. If it's tied to anxiety, this is a good choice. Okay? It does that through some really cool actions. Rosmarinic acid is in this guy, and he also, and rosmarinic acid, among others, are acetylcholinesterase. They're acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. Acetylcholine is one of our nerve's little messenger boys. Go, send this message, please, tell the next nerve, go, go. And then we have people who are, and then we have acetylcholine esterase. Ace means it cuts, right? So little messengers running between the nerves. And we have one guy that's like, you're not getting by. And then he grabs the messenger boy and he doesn't make it the rest of the way. This is a PG movie, so we're okay. And sometimes we want the message not be too strong. Now we're going to talk about the cognitive benefit at the same time as the emotional one here. Same story. If those messages get too high, well, we want to bring them down. If they get too low, we have anxiety and depression, and it affects our memory. And it's a very complicated system up there, but basically we want the guy who's like, this is my job, I'm supposed to catch the boy. You know, I'm supposed to stop the message. He keeps doing his thing. Other things in the brain just aren't able to send as much, we think, as they used to, but this guy doesn't get the message to slow down, to compensate, because it's like, you don't want too much either, that's not good. And so, if you take things like antidepressants or Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia medications, they often are acetylcholine esterase. This guy. They turn him off or down. And so all of a sudden your messages are getting by. And then Parkinson's does better. Alzheimer's does better. Dementia does better. And that's the medication. This has a molecule that does that. Is this as strong as medication? No, it's a plant. It does a lot of other things. And it's really good because it's healthy, and over time it's great for preventing those things. Now, if you have those things, would this help? I expect it would. I haven't actually used it in treatment, and I would not mix it with those medications because they're doing the same thing, and if you do it too much, that's not good, right? Or at least I wouldn't do it without doing proper research and talking to my doctor, except in my case, that's me. Well, you know, actually doctors go to other doctors. Anyway, we don't do, you get my point. Talk to your doctor before mixing medications, is what I'm trying to make clear here. Same with the depressant medication. Don't mix without talking to your doctor. Now, this has been used as a pot herb, which is another term for pretty safe, for centuries, many centuries throughout all of Asia, because this is originally from Asia and it escaped over here, and now it's an invasive weed. So we eat the weeds. But in South Korea, namon is what they call it. They have it in like a third of all of their dishes or something like that. China, they have it. It's called shiso in Japan. They have it quite often. They wrap meat in it. So it's pretty safe.
but technically it does have that similar to medication action, and so technically if you're taking those, talk to your doctor before mixing. It's just a food. So is grapefruit, which, you know, a quarter of all medications say don't take grapefruit. Why? Because don't. It's not good. Well, there are reasons, and I can tell them to you, but I'm going to show restraint for the first time this week. All right. So that's the cognitive side as well. It helps, particularly short term, it helps with spatial memory. I can't remember where my car is. That kind of thing. Finding your way through a maze helps with that. Remembering where your keys are presumably helps with that. That's a little bit more of like two memories put together, but there you go. It also might help with other memories. It's protective in some really cool ways that I could talk about in detail, but it does a lot of good things for the brain nerves in general over time. So having some of this regularly is a thing that I'm doing, and it's nice. So there is one other thing that I'm going to mention, then we'll go ahead and close up. The seed. The seed has a different action on it. It does do these things as well, but the seed is between 35 and 55, so roughly 45-ish% oil, which is a lot, and that's good. And half of that oil, over half, is omega-3, which is stupid expensive. If you've tried to supplement with that, and you've tried to get, you know, like if you get the supplements give you half a gram, sure, but it's like, no, I want 1, 2, or 3 grams a day. And then you're like, oh, Whole Foods more like whole paycheck, ha! And it's just, so Perilla seed has omega-3s, and it's a lot of them. Now, they are plant omega-3s, and there's a whole spiel on like, oh, plant omega-3s don't work. They do. You just have to have a balance between omega-3 and omega-6. And I can tell you a whole fun story about that. I will leave that for another time. You'll eventually get it out of me because I can't help myself. But basically, the bottom line is what I will give you, because I'm not trying to hide stuff from you or whatever. Try to balance the amount of omega-3 and omega-6, and then the omega-3s can suddenly be, the plant omega-3s are great. If they're unbalanced, plant omega-3s have trouble getting through. Fish omega-3s doesn't matter. But there's a story there. Plant omega-3s are better once they work. Fish omega-3s will just work, but they're not going to be as tailored by your body to work as well. It's really hard to summarize. So the seeds are great for that. They also carry some of the other actions as well, but I would stick using the flowers and the leaves if that's what I was looking for. For the memory, let's see, we had breath, there is one other action, but it can be hypnotic, which means it makes you ready to go to sleep, not that it means you're ready for hypnosis. And for that one, you have 3. So it went 1 teaspoon for the lungs, 2 for the brain, and 3 to try to sleep, or 3 tablespoons if it's fresh. Perilla is best used fresh. With that, let's go ahead and close up on the plants. I hope that was helpful. Any questions about any of these guys? We can probably take one. Okay, wonderful. With that, I will go ahead. Yes, I have a couple things that might be of interest to you guys. I do this every month, and so this is a monthly event. We are in Kansas, and Kansas is Saturday. First Saturday, 10 a.m. is when the next one will be. If this was helpful, or you had fun, or you want to, come back and break my kneecaps, I'll be here. First Saturday next month, 10 a.m. And other things. Over there, I have some herbal products if you're interested, and more of interest, perhaps, I think, to you guys. I do in-depth herbalism classes, and they change which ones I do every month. Sign up is over there. People who sign up on those sheets get a discount, and I do those up in J at my office. This month's classes, we're doing making perilla and other plants lozenges for helping open the lungs, get rid of a cough, clear the phlegm. So you put a mix in there and you make them, and then you have some free cough drops. You don't have to go to the store and get those things, and who knows what's in them.
And so we're doing that for one of the medicine making classes. And then we are also doing aqueous extracts for the deep dive. So I tend to do one medicine making class a month where we make hands-on medicine. And we talk about identifying an in-depth on a plant. And then I tend to do either another plant or a deep dive. Deep dive is when we talk about, all right, what are some principles of herbalism? This one's aqueous extracts. You can use water in a dozen different ways, and it's like it's just water. Well, 90% of your water, your body's made up of water for a reason, and if you know how to use it properly, you can either have stuff go bad really fast, not bad like poison dead, but like the medicine's broken up and not useful anymore, or you can have it be something that facilitates really good medicine. And so knowing how to use that is, we're going to go over about a dozen remedies-ish, methods of preparation and why and the science. Those are what we're doing this month. And then there's also an 8-week herbalism course that I'm starting in January if you wanted to really just hammer after it. So,
Have you checked with the BOTEC to see if they would be interested in having a class?
are they the Native American tribal?
Well, there is that also.
Okay.
But the BOTEC,
I haven't heard.
The NTC right out here on Highland Head.
Okay.
they have nursing and
Oh, the university or the college.
well, yeah, the vocational.
Okay, no, I hadn't thought of going there. Maybe I should.
Mm-hmm.
But they're always having some kind of classes in there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the tip. I will probably do that. So, awesome. I'll go ahead and turn this off. Thank you, guys.